Welcome to Untold Slave Stories. If you like real and hidden history, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're watching, don't forget to comment your good name and the name of your beautiful country below. Welcome to this journey into one of the most disturbing cases ever recorded in the history of the United States. Before we begin, I ask you to leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and the exact time you are listening to this narration. We want to know how far these true stories have traveled, and at what moments, day or night, they reach those who listen. In the autumn of 1837, the St. Louis Hotel in New Orleans was filled with the city's richest and most powerful men. That evening's auction attracted an unusual level of attention, even for a city known as the largest slave market in the United States. What made this sale different was not the number of enslaved people present, but the arrival of one woman who would soon be known across the city as the Pearl, a name that would echo through the narrow streets of the French Quarter for many decades. She stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, with skin described in auction records as the color of fresh cream touched with a hint of coffee. Her eyes were a deep amber, shifting with the light, and her long black hair fell in shining waves down her back. The auctioneer, Thomas Williams, introduced her simply as Lot Number 17. But everyone present sensed they were witnessing something unusual. As quiet whispers spread through the crowd like waves along the Mississippi River, the bidding opened at a shocking price, 5 times higher than that of an ordinary house servant. What followed became one of the strangest chapters in New Orleans history, a city already infamous for its harsh racial system and the cruel business of human ownership. This story would link powerful families, expose long-buried secrets, and eventually lead to unexplained disappearances. These mysteries remained unsolved until 1962, when renovations at the old Delacroix mansion on Royal Street revealed a hidden room. Inside were a leather-bound journal, 3 human finger bones, and a painted portrait of a woman whose beauty seemed almost unreal, even after time had faded the paint. His is the story of Elegance Reynolds, known to most as the Pearl, and the frightening truth behind her disappearance in the winter of 1842. The auction of 1837 was recorded by several witnesses, including James Thornton, a businessman from the North visiting New Orleans to establish cotton trade ties. In his personal diary, recovered from his Boston estate in 1952, Thornton described the scene with clear discomfort. He wrote that he had never seen such madness among respectable gentlemen. The woman for sale was truly remarkable in appearance, yet the behavior of the bidders felt driven by something deeper than simple ownership. There was an almost religious intensity in their bidding, as if possessing this woman carried meaning beyond money. What Thornton did not know was the complicated history behind the woman on the auction block. Elegance Reynolds was not born into slavery, nor did she arrive through common slave trade routes. Ship records from the port of New Orleans showed that she arrived only 3 weeks earlier, aboard a vessel called the Augusta, listed not as cargo, but as a passenger traveling with a merchant named Marcus Bennett. By the time the ship docked, Bennett was dead, reportedly from a fever caught in Havana. No free papers were found among his belongings, and Elegance was seized by port officials and eventually sold at auction. What remained hidden until the discovery of the Delacroix journal was why a woman so educated and refined found herself in such a position, and why certain families in New Orleans seemed determined to ensure she never left the city. To understand what followed, we must first understand New Orleans as it existed in 1837. The city was a complex mix of cultures, economies, and racial categories, unlike anywhere else in America. After the Louisiana Purchase, it evolved from a French and Spanish colony into a booming American port built on cotton, sugar, and enslaved labor. Unlike other southern cities, New Orleans operated under a 3-tier racial system. Between white and black populations existed free people of color, many of whom were wealthy landowners and even slaveholders themselves. T was a city of contradictions. Slave markets stood just steps away from opera houses. Laws regulated the treatment of enslaved people, while lavish social events quietly arranged relationships between white men and free women of color. Appearance and bloodlines carried immense importance, and freedom or bondage could depend on a single ancestor. This reality would become central to Elegane's fate. The winning bid that night came from Charles Delacroix, a wealthy sugar planter whose family had lived in Louisiana since early French colonial times. He paid the staggering sum of $7,000, enough to purchase an entire plantation workforce for a woman with no known experience in domestic or field labor. The notary, William Patterson, recorded something unusual. Delacroix insisted that Elena be listed not as a slave, but as a ward to be housed in his Royal Street residence. What happened after she entered the Delacroix home remains unclear. Household staff interviewed decades later recalled that she was treated not as a servant, but as a guest, given fine clothing and a private room. Yet she was never seen leaving the house. Visitors were told she was a distant cousin from France who spoke little English. Records show that Delacroix's wife, Isabelle, left for her family home in Natchez just 2 weeks after Elena arrived, taking their children with her. She would not return for 6 months. During that time, Delacroix closed his home to visitors and handled all business through written correspondence. January 1838, Dr. Samuel Lawrence was called to treat Elena for a persistent cough. In his medical journal preserved at Tulane University, he noted that while her health seemed stable, her emotional distress was alarming. When alone, she asked whether he knew the truth of her situation before arriving in New Orleans. Before he could answer, Delacroix returned, and she said no more. Bardee. Lawrence was never called again. By spring, rumors spread throughout the city about the mysterious beauty kept hidden in the Delacroix mansion. Some claimed she was his illegitimate daughter. Others said she was a foreign mistress. The strongest rumor linked her to the secretive Villars family, one of Louisiana's oldest lineages, whose patriarch, Henri Villars, had aggressively bid at the auction. Villars' family had withdrawn from public life, guarding their vast wealth and estate. What connection could they have to a young woman from Havana? That question remained unanswered for more than a century. The Delacroix journal, discovered in 1962, finally offered insight. Written in a careful, educated hand, it began in February 1838 with simple daily notes. As months passed, the tone changed. Elena wrote of confinement, fear, and growing suspicion. She described forbidden areas, whispered conversations in French. Her realization that promises of freedom were lies meant to control her. By summer, she planned escape. She wrote of contacting a housemaid, hoping to reach the American consul, believing her birth in Philadelphia could prove her freedom. Her next entry read simply, "It was a trap." She was moved to Delacroix's plantation, Beau Refuge, where her confinement worsened. There, she crossed paths with Joseph Miller, a northern abolitionist posing as a doctor. His secret letters confirmed her belief that her imprisonment involved inheritance and identity, not ownership alone. Miller fled Louisiana before helping her. Her journal entries became rare and fragmented. She overheard discussions of inheritance and verification, mentions of the Villars family, and warnings never to speak their name. In February 1839, Henri Villars himself visited her. He asked about her mother, a gold locket, and her father's death. When she answered, his reaction suggested painful confirmation. He died 3 days later, triggering a bitter inheritance dispute. Delacroix searched her room and seized her mother's Bible, containing her birth papers. In later entries, Elena realized the truth. She believed her father was a Villars, possibly Henri's son, and that her existence threatened a powerful fortune. Her enslavement was meant to erase her claim. The final journal entry, dated September 3, 1839, spoke of escape. She planned to trade her mother's pearl earrings for help boarding a riverboat north. The journal ends there. Plantation records confirm a woman matching her description was reported missing the next day. A reward was offered. The search focused on riverboats heading north toward freedom. What truly happened to Elena Reynolds remains one of the most haunting unanswered questions in American history. Instead, the evidence suggests that Elena managed to return to New Orleans. It seems likely that she planned to search the Delacroix townhouse for her mother's papers before leaving the South for good. A receipt from a French quarter apothecary dated September 7, 1839, shows the purchase of women's toiletries charged to the account of Marie Laveau, the famous voodoo priestess who was known to sometimes hide fugitives within her wide network of contacts. For nearly 3 years after that, Elena Reynolds disappeared completely from official records. During this time, the Villars inheritance case moved forward. and in 1841 Louis Villars was officially confirmed as the rightful heir after no other claimants came forward with enough proof of family connection. Charles Delacroix, after launching an intense search for his missing property, seemed to give up the effort. He turned his attention instead to the growing financial troubles that were beginning to destroy his once successful sugar business. Then, in January of 1842, Nina Reynolds suddenly reappeared in New Orleans society in a way that shocked even that scandal-hardened city. She attended the annual Mardi Gras ball at the St. Louis Hotel, the very place where she had been sold 5 years earlier. This time, she was not a slave or servant, but the well-dressed companion of Louis Villars, the new head of the Villars family. Several witnesses later described the sensation caused by her arrival. A society writer for the Daily Picayune noted that conversation in the ballroom stopped the moment they entered. Nina wore a deep blue silk gown that highlighted her striking appearance and graceful presence. Those who remembered earlier events at the same location exchanged knowing looks, though no one dared openly mention her past. What agreement existed between Nina and Louis Villars remains unclear. Some historians believe Louis secretly purchased her freedom, others or more complicated situation, suggesting Nina gained leverage over the Villars heir after discovering documents related to her true parentage. What is certain is that their public appearance together broke social rules that New Orleans society rarely crossed, regardless of Nina's unclear racial status. Charles Delacroix was also present at the ball that night. Multiple accounts state that he became visibly shaken when he saw Nina with Louis Villars. He tried to approach them but was held back by friends and soon left the event. 3 days later, he filed a legal complaint claiming that Louis Villars had illegally taken human property belonging to the Delacroix estate. The complaint was quietly withdrawn within 24 hours. On February 12, 1842, Nina and Louis Villars were seen boarding a steamship bound for France. Passenger records list them as Mr. Louis Villars and Ward. They left behind a city filled with rumor and speculation. They would never return to the United States. The story might have ended there if not for what happened at the Delacroix mansion 2 weeks after their departure. On February 27, 1842, neighbors noticed strange activity at the usually quiet house on Royal Street. Lights stayed on all night, and servants were seen carrying large trunks to waiting carriages. By morning, the house was empty. When creditors arrived days later, they found the home abandoned but not hurriedly. Clothes still hung in wardrobes, books remained on shelves, and food sat in the pantry, as if the family expected to return. Charles Delacroix, his wife Isabel, and their 3 children had vanished. At first, many assumed they had fled to escape debt. That theory darkened in March 1842, when the bodies of 2 men were found in swampland outside the city. They were identified as Delacroix's private secretary and the plantation manager from Beau. Refuge. Both had been killed by a single gunshot to the head. A police investigation began, but little progress was made. The lead detective noted that people connected to the case were unwilling to speak, suggesting powerful forces were involved. The investigation was officially closed in June 1842. For more than 100 years, the disappearance of the Delacroix family remained one of New Orleans' most enduring mysteries. It was occasionally mentioned in newspapers and local histories, but never solved. Then, in 1962, renovation work at the long-abandoned Delacroix mansion revealed a hidden room containing Nina's journal, 3 finger bones, and a painted portrait. The journal gave important insight into her captivity, but ended before her return in 1842. The finger bones were examined by forensic experts in 1964 and were found to belong to a man who had died around 120 years earlier, roughly matching the time of the Delacroix disappearance. Later, DNA testing was inconclusive due to the poor condition of the remains. The portrait offered the most intriguing clue. It showed Nina in an elegant blue gown, possibly the same one worn at the Mardi Gras ball. X-ray testing of the painting in 1975 revealed another image beneath it showing a man, a woman, and a young girl. Art historians identified them as Jean-Baptiste Villars, his wife, and their infant daughter, based on comparisons with other Villars family portraits. This discovery strongly supported the idea that Nina was the legitimate daughter of Jean-Baptiste Villars, and therefore had a rightful claim to the Villars fortune. But why was this proof hidden in the Delacroix house instead of being taken with her when she fled with Louis Villars? Part of the answer emerged in 1982 when letters were found among Villars' family papers donated to a historic collection. The letters, exchanged between Louis Villars and an unnamed correspondent in Paris between 1841 and 1842, suggested a much more complex plan. In one letter, Louis wrote that arrangements were proceeding as planned and that he had contacted the woman involved, explaining their shared interest in resolving the matter quietly. He noted that she was cautious but understood the value of cooperation. He also mentioned that D remained the main obstacle due to his financial ties to Louis's late uncle. A later letter confirmed that the documents had been verified by a lawyer and were legally sound. It stated that if the papers had appeared during the inheritance case, the outcome would have been very different. Instead, the private agreement gave Elena her freedom and a settlement, while protecting the family from scandal and financial upheaval. Delacroix, however, was not satisfied and remained a threat. The final letter, written shortly before the Delacroix family vanished, stated simply that the problem had resolved itself unexpectedly and that no further action was needed. What exactly happened in those early days of February 1842 is still unknown. Historians believe that after seeing Elena at the Mardi Gras ball, Delacroix realized she had escaped and aligned herself with Louis Villars. Facing financial ruin and social disgrace, he may have tried to blackmail them. Louis and Elena, preparing to leave for France, would have had strong reason to ensure his silence. The timing of their departure and the disappearance of the Delacroix family soon after suggests a connection. The murdered secretary and plantation manager may have been removed as witnesses. The unidentified finger bones found in the hidden room point toward a violent end for the Delacroix family. French police records discovered in 1968 provided the final piece of the puzzle. A report from May 1842 recorded the arrival of Louis Villars and L'Elanina Reynolds in Paris, where they lived quietly using funds from a large bank draft. They later moved to England, where records from 1851 list them as husband and wife with 2 children. After 1861, they disappear from public records. The Delacroix family was never found. Their Royal Street house stood empty for decades and gained a reputation as one of the most haunted homes in New Orleans. Local legends claimed that on certain nights, sounds of struggle and a woman's victorious laughter could be heard. The story of Elena Reynolds shows how slavery, race, and inheritance laws collided in Louisiana, leading to disappearances and likely murders. Her portrait now hangs in a museum as a silent reminder of a woman who refused to accept the fate chosen for her. Her journal remains a powerful historical record of captivity and resistance. In 1969, further renovations uncovered a gold locket beneath the floorboards of the hidden room. Inside was a tiny painting of a ship at sea, engraved with the initials JV and MR, and dated February 20, 1816, 9 months before Elena's birth. The locket, like Elena herself, crossed the boundaries between slavery and freedom, silence and truth. It now rests beside her portrait, 2 pieces of a story that still haunts a city built on secrets. The hidden room in the Delacroix house has since been kept as part of the building's historical restoration. Tour guides now tell visitors about the mysterious woman who was once sold at auction at the St. Louis Hotel, her connection to one of the city's most powerful families, and her eventual escape to Europe. What they cannot say with certainty is what became of those who tried to keep her enslaved. Like many of the darkest chapters in American history, some truths remain buried under layers of time, silence, and shared guilt. Perhaps that is appropriate. In a city built on stable land, where the dead are buried above ground because the water level is too high, some secrets are bound to rise eventually. Others stay hidden, known only through fragments and quiet whispers, like distant laughter drifting through the warm night air of the French Quarter. In 1958, almost 10 years before Elena's journal was discovered, a strange event occurred that some historians believe may be connected to her story. An elderly woman named Margaret Wilson came to New Orleans claiming to be the great-granddaughter of Elena Reynolds. She carried a bundle of letters said to have been written by Ella Lanina from London between 1852 and 1868. The letters were addressed to a former house servant from the villa's estate who had remained loyal to her. If genuine, the letters revealed that Ella Lanina and Louis had married in France, where racial laws did not forbid their union as they would have in Louisiana. They lived comfortably on the settlement Louis arranged from the villa's estate, and raised 3 children who grew up unaware of their mother's painful past in America. Ella Lanina appeared to have found some peace in her new life, though she wrote of recurring nightmares about Beau Refuge and of a terrible necessity that came before her departure from New Orleans. Most importantly, one letter dated October 1867 made a vague but troubling reference to the fate of the Delacroix family. She wrote that she was still haunted by what Louis felt forced to arrange that February night. Though she understood it was done for their safety, she could not stop thinking about the children. Louis had assured her they were sent away beforehand, but she had no way to confirm this, and it deeply troubled her conscience. Margaret Wilson submitted the letters to the Louisiana Historical Society for verification, but she died suddenly of a heart attack before the process was completed. Shortly afterward, the letters vanished from the Society's temporary records. The official explanation claimed they were accidentally discarded during an office renovation. No relatives came forward to claim Wilson's belongings, and once again the trail went cold. Then, in 1976, a researcher named Thomas Lawrence, while studying the history of New Orleans slave markets, uncovered shipping records from March 1842. These records showed 3 children traveling alone from New Orleans to Havana. Their ages matched those of the Delacroix children. Though they were listed under the surname Reynolds, their guardian was named Martha Bernard, the same Martha mentioned in Ella Lanina's journal as the woman assigned to watch her at Beau Refuge plantation. This discovery supported the idea suggested in the Wilson letters that the Delacroix children had been spared whatever fate met their parents. It also suggested careful planning rather than a simple act of revenge. If Ella Lanina and Louis arranged the children's safe passage before dealing with Charles and Isabel Delacroix, it showed a moral complexity that defies easy judgment. Cuban records showed no further trace of the children or their guardian after their arrival. They may have blended into local life, been taken in by French-speaking communities, or perhaps sent farther away to Europe or South America so they could never return to claim their past or seek revenge. In the summer of 1981, during a severe drought that caused the Mississippi River to fall to unusually low levels, a local fisherman made a disturbing discovery near the former site of Beau Refuge plantation. The receding water revealed the remains of an old flatboat containing human bones. The remains belonged to a man, a woman, and 2 adult males. Forensic examination showed all 4 had been killed by gunshots to the head. Iron chains had been to weigh the bodies down before the boat was sunk. The remains were too damaged for positive identification, but personal items found nearby included a pocket watch engraved with the initials CD and a woman's locket holding small portraits of 3 children who closely matched descriptions of the Delacroix heirs. The estimated time of death matched the year of the family's disappearance in 1842. This discovery offered the strongest evidence yet that Charles and Isabel Delacroix, along with 2 male associates, likely the secretary and plantation manager, had been executed and disposed of in the river. The careful planning suggested not anger or impulse, but a deliberate removal of threats and witnesses. What remained uncertain was Ella Lanina's role in this violent ending. Was she involved in planning revenge, or did Louis act alone to clear the path for their future? The method of execution suggested experienced men, likely hired hands, not Louis himself. Yet the fact that the Delacroix children were separated and spared before the killings hints at Ella Lanina's influence. A final act of mercy from a woman who had once been torn from her own family. In 1994, another key piece of evidence surfaced. An architectural historian studying the villa's family estate found a sealed compartment hidden inside a fireplace mantel. Inside was a leather pouch containing a handwritten confession signed by Louis Villars and dated February 25, 1842, just 2 days before the Delacroix family vanished. The confession stated that what had been set in motion could not be undone. Louis wrote that eliminating Charles and Isabel Delacroix had become necessary for Elenina's safety and freedom. Their claims would have followed them even to Europe, and Charles's financial desperation made him dangerous. He explained that the children were sent to Cuba under Martha's care, insisting this me. Our side came at Elenina's request. He admitted the men hired for the task were paid well and warned into silence. He recorded the truth not out of regret, but to ensure that someone would know what truly happened. Handwriting experts confirmed the confession matched Louis Villars's known writing. Its discovery settled responsibility for the killings while raising deeper moral questions. Louis acted as judge and executioner in a society that offered Elenina no legal protection or justice. In 2002, DNA testing compared remains from a London cemetery where records showed Elenina Villars was buried in 1872 with genetic material from the finger bones found in the hidden room. The results suggested the bones likely belonged to Charles Delacroix, preserved as a grim reminder alongside her journal and portrait. Elenina Reynolds Villars died at age 55, having spent more than half her life free in Europe. Church records show her funeral was well attended, suggesting she found belonging and peace. Louis Villars died 6 years later. Their children married into English families, unaware of their mother's racial background or extraordinary past. The Delacroix children were never definitively traced. Despite years of research, they vanished into history, victims of a system that valued property and bloodlines over humanity. Elenina's story stands as proof of the strength of the human spirit under cruelty. Born to a free woman of color and a disowned heir, she navigated enslavement, survival, and violent freedom. Today, visitors can see her portrait, the hidden family painting beneath it, and the gold locket linking her to her true parents. These objects, along with her journal, form one of the most complete personal records from within American slavery. Yet much remains unsaid, living in silences and unanswered questions. In recent years, Villars' descendant established a scholarship in Elenina's name and formally acknowledged her place in the family. It is a small step toward reckoning with a painful past. The former Delacroix mansion now operates as a small hotel. Guests report strange sounds and feelings near the hidden room. Whether ghostly or imagined, the house still holds her story within its walls. Elenina's journal ends with escape plans, but her life continued far beyond. She changed herself from property to person, from captive to free woman. In doing so, she exposed the deep contradiction at the heart of slavery, the humanity it tried to erase. The mystery of the pearl is not only about secrets and violence, it is the story of a woman who insisted on writing her own life in a world determined to deny her one. That she succeeded, at terrible cost, remains both an inspiration and an accusation. As night falls over the French Quarter, tour guides still point out the Delacroix house. Few realize the ground beneath them holds untold lives. The river keeps its secrets, but sometimes truth rises. In Elenina's painted amber eyes, visitors see pain and strength, vulnerability and resolve. She looks past us, towards something beyond. What she saw remains unknown. In 2019, advanced imaging confirmed the hidden family portrait beneath her own and revealed that Elenina herself likely painted over it. The act was both hiding and reclaiming identity. And so the story ends where it began, with the image of a woman whose beauty masked an even greater strength. The mystery may never be fully solved, but in its outline we see the larger American struggle with race, identity, and justice. For every Elenina remembered, countless others were lost without record. Their silence still echoes on warm southern nights. Listen closely, and you may hear them, voices that remind us the past is never truly gone, and the human spirit, once awakened, cannot be contained. As written on the back of her portrait when it entered the collection in 1974, remember her not for her beauty, nor only for her suffering, but for her determination to live on her own terms. In this, she achieved what few ever do. She wrote herself into being,